Okay, hopefully you can hear me this time. All right, I am going to paint the hand that goes to this portrait that I'm working on, and I thought I would just jump on and let you guys see it live. So we're going to be putting in some jewelry, and I want to do it with as few brush marks as possible. So with that thought in mind, we'll just start with a little underneath base color to this first ring. I like to go with the mid-tone, like a base, and then I can put in my darker colors. And then I like to go in after that with the bright highlights. So I started this live video just a few moments ago, and it didn't look like my volume or my mic was working. So hopefully you can hear me this time. It looks like I can see the mic working. All right, so I've mixed a little bit of, I've got this Gamblin transparent black on my palette. I really like the transparent black. It's made from two colors. I believe it's red and green. I forget exactly, but it is nice and transparent, and it mixes very easily with other colors. So if you're afraid of using black, this is a good way to tiptoe into that area. So there's a lot of diamonds in this ring. So I'm just going to make some of these marks and then go back in with the white highlight. So I'm going to show you guys next week the whole painting of the portrait. And if any of you have seen my portrait painting demos, you know I like the selective start method. So that's how I painted her. And you will see that process from start to finish in my next video. But I didn't want to not post something this week, so that's why I went live with the hand. And apparently we have some kind of crazy storm coming, so I thought I would go ahead and get it on there today in case I can't do it on Saturday because of the storm. So the light source is coming from above this way. So I feel like I can see it getting a little bit darker as it moves away from the face on the left. And there's a little bit of a shadow underneath the ring there. Now, one thing with portrait painting, you want to keep your shadow colors the same. So I'm just going to clean that up a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of this reddish dark shadow color that I've been using on it. So I've got warm shadows. I don't want to jump into a cool shadow all of a sudden. That would not be great. Unless you have some reason for doing it. Maybe there's some other secondary light source that's creating a cool shadow on this ring finger. That could work, and causing you to have to paint a cool shadow. I think that'll do. Let me see if I can get you a little bit more of the palette view. You can see it a little bit there. So I'm working on getting there's a cord I have to get to be able to pull up the second camera I have for my palette view, but I'm filming it. So next week's video, you'll see the palette view along with the painting, brushstroke by brushstroke. I don't know about you guys, but I am a huge fan of the selective start method. I just never have the patience for all that initial starting, line drawing, charcoal drawing. Now, sometimes if it's, I don't know, a multi-figure situation, I like to do an underpainting, but I even do that in the selective start method. I like to just start with one color, and then that way, you know, one color, it's a lot easier to manage than full color all at once. So with the selective start method and full color, you've got to do each brush stroke very carefully and with a lot of thought. You have to put it in the correct spot. You have to put it in the correct value. It has to be the correct shape. And if you think about your painting as more of, you know, like a mosaic tile situation, and you're putting them all together and you're not painting a face. If you just think about it as painting those shapes, at some point you're going to look up and you're going to be like, dang, I painted a face. So I don't know. I just tend to like to jump right in. I don't like to mess around with too much drawing initially. Now, that's not to say you can't go ahead and put everything in a selective start manner and then, you know, go back over it and fine tune what you've got, because I do like to do that. Once I've got a good amount of the face put in, then, you know, you can go in and fine tune it. Nothing wrong with that. You know, there's no rule or law that says once you put down a brush stroke, you can't go back over it again. Now, you could even turn the selective start method into an indirect painting method, which I've also done. You know, once the painting dries and you maybe see some things that you want to continue to work on, do it. Definitely. But at least it lets me, I don't know, kind of jump in with both feet, as they say, both hands, both paintbrushes. I'm just jumping in. I'd rather work out some of the issues on the canvas while I'm painting. I mean, I like drawing, but if I'm going to draw, I want to just draw. I don't want to paint. That's just me. Oh, and when I first started learning to paint, I did used to go in with a pencil, sometimes charcoal, and put down initial, you know, outline drawing to work over top of. And then all my stupid charcoal or paint pencil marks would mix into my paint because I didn't use a fixative. But I just like the feeling of a paintbrush. There is some really cool liquid charcoal that you can paint with. I suppose I've never used it, but that might be an interesting way to start a portrait painting. I feel like I like really trying to create good, fun, artistic brush strokes initially. That's part of the fun of painting for me. And if I can't do that at the start of the painting, I don't know, that's all that I feel like I want to work towards. I just want to get right into it, putting down cool brush strokes. All right, I feel like I need a little skin color here just to shapen that up. So you can see I have a lot of, it's very painterly. I'm not working to get a photorealistic situation here. And JS Sargent, he was really good at just plopping down a few brush strokes and creating jewelry. I went back and I looked at some of his hands recently too. I think his hands are just amazing. It's like they look so real, and that's the beauty of like a painterly painting. When you're viewing it from further back, there's a lot of realism. And it's not until you step close, then you see the beauty of the brush strokes. And that is what I love about painting, is seeing how someone puts down the paint. So I think it's a little dark in the middle still yet. Let's just put a little more white around that. It's more, okay, it's not an exact copy of that ring. It's more my interpretation, which is another good thing to be kind of realizing. You're not a slave to a photograph. You are in charge. You make the painting work for you. Nobody said I had to, I'm not a photocopier. So I'm just going to paint it how I want to paint it. Still want to make it look like a ring though, which I think it's looking like a ring. So there's a really yellowish color to her skin in the areas that are the lightest. Seems like there's a really bright kind of a yellow light hitting her. I like the nuances of hands, trying to get the concave and convex positioning of each little part of the hand. Okay. So with selective start, I have my palette already mixed up before I start painting. So I look at my reference and I plan ahead, and I mixed most of my colors. I don't mix them all. As you can see, my palette gets pretty crazy. Let's see if I can show it to you. Yeah, that's my palette. So it was all neat and tidy initially, but here's where we are now. It's a mess. But that's okay, because I've created lots of beautiful in-between colors in the meantime that are working nicely. So I picked this photograph because I saw a lot of challenges coming in the shadow area, especially this cheek area. I knew that was going to be challenging for me because there's so much kind of purple, cool colors coming in, while the other side of her face is so kind of yellow, and there's some beautiful peach colors in there. And I wanted to get the challenge of capturing that with those mauves in the neck. And I like that blue background, but I thought it would be interesting to see how I could capture that. A bit of a challenge. And it was a challenge. There were moments where I kept doubting myself. I wasn't sure if it was coming, if it was going to work. But this morning when I got up, I looked at it again and I felt like it worked. It's funny how that happens. You can be working on a painting and you just feel like you're struggling and struggling, yet you come back to it. Even if you come back to it in like an hour, you're like, okay, I struggled, but I think I pulled it out. So I'm using this crazy comber brush. I don't know if you guys can see that. I don't know if it's probably blurry there. It's kind of like a comb, but mine's a little older, so it's kind of frayed up. But I love the really brushy strokes that it lets me put down. So I've got this little knuckle coming out here, and then it goes in a little bit. I may have to get some blue to tidy that up. And this is really light, and as it moves away from the light here, it gets a little bit more neutral, almost a little green. So if you know where your light source is and you can figure out how the light's hitting a certain area you're painting, you can understand whether you're using a warm color, a neutral color, or a cool color. So if the light is hitting directly on, like her forehead, you know that's going to be a cool, bright, and being that's the forehead, it's going to have a little bit more yellow in it. But when you start getting to where you're parallel to your light source, that's when you hit those halftones, those more neutral colors. I don't know, and that was one of the things I struggled with when I was first painting, was kind of understanding how to paint. I could see the halftones, but I was like, oh my gosh, what color is that? It was like always for me a little bit confusing to figure out how to paint the halftones. So it was helpful to understand that when the light's parallel to the surface you're painting, then they're going to be more neutral. So that's what I'm seeing here in the hand. I keep coming in with these darker colors, which is okay. I just lay another brush stroke right over top of it. That's what I love about selective start painting. You can really just lay down the paint and see if you like it. If it's not working, adjust. So that was a little bit too dark right there. So I want to keep the light, this edge of the hand light yet neutral because it's parallel to the light source. I feel like when I paint hands, I like to think of it as if I were sculpting, but I'm also looking for the little mosaic tile shapes. And I don't like my brush strokes to be too long. I like to keep them a little more succinct. Short brush strokes. I've been told that you shouldn't make your brush strokes much longer than the length of the bristles on the brush you're using. Not a big fan of rules. Maybe that's more like a guideline. But I do think about that sometimes. So this image is from one of those free sources. It's called pexels.com. So if you wanted to paint it yourself, I'm going to put a link to that image in the description so you can grab the photo reference and maybe you'd want to try painting it. You'll see in the next video that comes out, you could actually paint along with it. It's not going to be in real time because you're seeing real time right now, and I don't know, I feel like I paint kind of slow, especially when you're doing selective start. You know, what you make up in time by jumping right in, you slow down when you're actually painting it. Like I said, it's a lot to think about. It's a lot to manage all at once. Putting in the correct color, the correct value, the correct shape, the correct spot. But if you do all that, then you'll see your portrait emerge. It's a little light. Let's get some darker blue. I love using blue backgrounds on portraits. Plays so nice with the skin tones. Most any skin tone I feel like works great with a blue background. And I'm holding my brush way back towards the end of the brush handle. That helps to keep the painting loose. I'm not going for anything too tight here, so that is why I hold the paintbrush so far back. So I would love to know if any of you guys have painted a portrait in selective start. I remember the first time that I saw it. I was at a workshop given by Tina Garrett, and she was teaching 3 ways to start a portrait painting. It's a great workshop. If you get a chance to go to one of her workshops, highly recommend it. But she jumped into the 3rd way, which is the selective start, which you're seeing here. And I don't know, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm allowed to paint this way? Really? It's so funny. When I was first learning to paint, I felt like there were all these rules you had to follow. The other really cool thing that she helped me kind of get past was, I don't know, you always hear this crazy stigma about working from photos. And I enjoy working from photos. I just think it's easier working from a photo. I mean, yeah, it's great to have a model, but I don't know. It just seems like it's not always convenient to have a model ready to, pull into your studio and tell them to sit there for 3 to 6 hours. Plus, there's the cost. I mean, it's not something that, you should pay your model something. Maybe offer them the painting at the end, something like that. But a photo's easy. I always can get a decent photo, and I like to take my own photos. And I enjoy taking my own photos. So it's really fun to, know I'm going to work with a model to photograph her and have the reference for painting. There's a lot to be said with taking your own photos that you're going to paint from. It's a great way to understand and learn lighting. I've got some videos on the channel that talk about setting up your lighting for photographing a model. If you need any help with that, it is there. All right, I think I want to pull this edge. Well, let's see. It just seems to be coming around here a little bit more. I like putting the paint on and just kind of pulling it up and letting it just dance there. I'm not blending or putting, any back and forth moments. Keep my head out of the shot. So that's how I like to just dab it on. That's part of the beauty of working with oil paints. You can really kind of sculpt the paint. I suppose with acrylics, they have some of that heavy body things you can add in. And to really make jewelry sparkle, you want to try to get some of your darkest darks next to your areas of the brightest highlights, and that'll really make them pop. So I like to go in and find, like right here is a really light highlight, so I can just dab a little dot of black next to it, and then it'll make that really pop. But you don't want to overdo it. You don't want your jewelry popping out all over the place. Alrighty, I think it's time to go to the other finger. So let's do, it's getting a little warmer because it's not really parallel to the light, this finger area here. It's kind of starting to roll away from the light, so it's a different color than the other fingers. Let's try putting in some of this base color. Like I see this color in the knuckle. So I had painted the thumb already, which has a lot of heat to it. Fingers tend to have a lot of color, a lot of saturation in them. You can get away with a lot of red in a hand, especially the tips of the fingers. There's a lot of blood in the tip, so it reads as pretty saturated, pretty colorful. Dipping in to this little area right here, it's a bit of a shadowy color, and it's kind of purple. I don't know. I'm going to put it in. If I don't like it, I'll change it. That's not bad. I feel like it was not as purple as I thought it was going to be. But we need to make that knuckle a little darker. I don't know why I refer to myself as a we when I'm painting. I don't know. What does that say about me? Funny, right? Okay. There's some John Singer Sargent hand brush marks. Just keep them really painterly. Need to move this knuckle up a little bit. I think that's warm enough. See, what needs to happen is this area right here needs to have a little dark shadow right here. That's going to give us a little more context for this other finger. So I'm going to put that in now. So you can't see this, but I have my reference image pulled right up on my computer screen, and it's placed directly next to my easel, and it is pretty close, which I believe helps see what I need to do since it's right there. I tend to like my reference material to my left, probably because I'm right-handed. So even when you're painting these tiny shapes like this shadow figure, you have to transition it into the finger. And transitions happen by making little steps of different colors and different values, and sometimes different temperatures, depending how many steps you're taking. So I'm putting in this really dark line here. I don't want to leave it as just a crazy, super hard, dark line. So then I have to come back in with a little bit lighter, still a warm color though, and now a little bit lighter even still, so that I can step towards the light. So each step is building my transition. And you can put your steps in by just slightly overlapping each one so that you can see them, and then you can go back with a clean brush. So I just wiped my brush off, and you can stitch them together. So I wiped it off again. Now I'm stitching this tiny transition. They're really tiny into the finger. So I like that. I think that worked as far as transitioning into that shadow area. Although this dark bit right here is coming up a little high. So I'm gonna just bring him down a little bit. Still using these warm colors, just getting a little bit lighter as I transition towards light. I think I need one more step. I feel like this dark and then it goes light too quickly, so I've got an in-between color there. I like that. That works for me. Okay, now I've got a pretty warm shadow happening here. So I'm putting in these areas of shadow, neutral color and lights, kind of rough, and then we'll stitch them together like I just did in that other finger so that they look a little more joined. Not so left out in the open there. I don't mind seeing the transition, especially when it's a shadow going to then, as it moves toward the light, right before it hits the light will be the most saturated area. So I'm going to grab a warm saturated color to help with the transition right along that shadow there. And then it steps a little lighter, but a little more neutral than that last brush stroke to make the transition. And then it would go into the cooler, yellowy light color along this edge. And I can see it pulling in towards the knuckle a little bit. And there's still a little more neutral coming around here just before we get, so her ring on this finger is up towards the part of just above the knuckle. So that's interesting. I knew this would be a fun portrait to paint. A lot of interesting things happening. So I'm going to grab some more saturated color for right here, and I want to put a tiny bit of it on the knuckle. I see some coming in there. And it looks like the top part of her knuckle has a bit of a shadow on it from her other finger blocking the light. So that means I need a little bit less saturated, but still dark. Less saturated, but still dark. And we'll just put that right in there. I'm using a pretty big brush, which I think is okay. I want to keep my fingers more painterly. I don't want to get too caught up in little precise lines. Not yet. That's more the refinement period. Like I said, once you get your brush marks in an area pretty filled in, then you can go back and refine the area if you want to. So I'm going to do the same thing again with this ring. I'm going to put in that sort of mid color, and then we can put our darks and our lights in. So I'm painting these rings with 3 colors: gray in the middle value, and white for the highlights, and then black. And so as we're just plopping those in, some of those brush strokes will mix together and we'll have a variety of grays and different values making up the whole ring. So it looks like it comes out past the finger a little bit. So I just want to pull that out there. That'll work. And bring this guy up. So I'm also thinking about the value structure. So it's obviously lighter up here. Then it gets a little darker in the middle here, and then much more dark as it's completely away from the light. So you can kind of see how that's happening. The majority of the light is right here on this little corner. And these comber brushes work really well to make the kind of marks that you see here in these sort of rhinestone. It looks like black rhinestone studded ring. So I'm going to grab some of that pure chromatic black and just dab him in there, because these are black rhinestones, whereas that first ring was like diamonds or regular color rhinestones. And since that got a little dark, then I'm going to go right in with my white and just kind of press that in that area where I want it to just kind of get a little bit of the white, not too much. So it's mixing by way of pressing into the color. No blending. No blending there. All right, so now using my teeny tiny, what do they call this thing? A spotter. I see a light highlight poking in here. So light's coming up from underneath. Probably some reflected light. Now what's interesting is right along this edge here, there's some highlights, but they are more of a peach color than white. So they're reflecting her skin. So I'm going to paint them with peach rather than white. Okay, and let's see, we can get the edge of that ring to show. Now there's a black rhinestone kind of popping up here and another one right here. So it's really good to work wet into wet when you're doing jewelry, and just keep poking in the different values and making really cool brush marks. So I'm going to get some of this black again and make some of these rhinestones. I love painting jewelry. It's so fun. So creative. She's wearing an earring too, so I'll probably paint that. Well, I know I'll paint it, but if you want to see me paint the earring, then you'll watch the demo. All right, I want to put in a little more flesh color so that I can see more of my edge here on the ring. So this part of the finger is much more saturated and dark because it's in the shadow. So that needs to be a completely different color than that part of the finger. So let's hit it with, oh, there's some really pretty reflected light coming in here. We'll make sure we show. I was able to capture some of that reflected light underneath her chin that was happening. Now, I don't know where that was coming from. As far as when they took the photo, there must have been some other light source that was at play there. I'm going to pull this flesh color all the way into that fingernail. I think that'll help me paint the color of the fingernails while I'm doing it. I'm just going to push that towards the ring there. That made a really nice little fleck of light for the edge of the ring. So it's getting a little more saturated and a little darker as it comes into this shadow. So that is coming in there. So I don't want to go too dark. So what happens with photos is the shadows that you see in the photograph tend to be too dark, but they're usually in the photo darker than what they would be in real life. So if you know that, then you can adjust for it in your painting. The other thing that happens is highlights tend to be too bright or too light. So if you have a photo that you're working from and you can pull it up in Photoshop, you can actually go in and adjust for that, which I like to do. So sometimes, I think I did that with this photo, my reference. I lightened the shadows in the photo and darkened the highlights. So that made her a little more realistic. Sometimes I actually have two different references pulled up so that I can see different things. Sometimes I want to see a photo where I really, really go crazy and lighten the shadows a lot. Because you want to be able to read information sometimes, especially if the photo you're working from was already pretty dark. That way you can see what you need to see. But then you may want to work from the, you don't want to work from a super dark photo. So you have both photo references on your computer screen. All right, let's refine that finger. So the first thing I want to do is put in some of this fingernail shape. You don't want to outline anything in a portrait too perfectly. You don't want, a complete dark outline around this fingernail. It's going to have varying degrees of thickness, the line, and it's going to have varying degrees of light and dark. So I think that's pretty good. Now, there's a lot more saturation in this fingertip. And I want to show that. So I'm going to, and I don't see it as much in the photo reference, but I am the master of my painting. And if I want to put it in, I'm going to put it in. And I want to put it in. So here we go. I'm putting in a lot of red. Now we can go back. I'll go back and work that down a little bit. But it's okay to have that initial shock of color and then take it down. I'm going to pull it up a little bit into my shadow because our shadows are warm, so that's okay to do. I'm blocking you with my big head. Okay. I think I need to have a nice bit of blue just to shape that finger back. There we go. Voila. That's another thing that I love about these comber brushes is they really let you kind of tickle the paint. So I'm moving the paint around, but it's still, when you're painting wet on top of wet, you don't want to dig into the paint. You just want to, glide along the surface of it. And let's get this reflected light. So I'm going to grab a little red, and I like this Naples yellow light with the cad red, and it makes a really good reflected light color, which is kind of what I see here. And I think it needs to be a little bit lighter. So let me add a little more Naples yellow light to it. There we go. That'll work. Appears to be a lot darker on this side, and there's also a bit of a highlight right there. Let's see if we can get it there. Like that. I'm sculpting that highlight there. It's just ever so slightly along that finger. But I want to go in. This part of the finger's turning down a little bit because there's like a little knuckle right there. So we got to darken it so it reads as bending there. I'd rather start out a little lighter and then need to go darker than the other way around. I feel like it's easier to go darker than to try to go lighter. All right, that's not bad, not bad, not bad. Let's get a little play of color here to show the shape of the ring. There we go. All right, this finger, well, I'm actually going to put in a little more highlights now. I should finish this ring, or at least bring it a little closer before I move to the next finger. So remember, you want to put a dark and a super bright highlight next to each other to make it pop. So there's a dark and there's a bright. It's actually pure black and pure white, that chromatic black. So these highlights are needing to be a little less bright. So we're putting them next to gray. So they're not going to pop as much. You want to balance that. You want to have a little bit of pop and a little bit of where your eyes can rest, is how they say it. I need an area for my eyes to rest. Okay, I think that's reading pretty good. Lost our peach highlights. Let me put those back in. So right there. Oh yeah, that looks nice. And right there. And then a little line there. Pretty slight, but it looks nice. I could use, I'm not going to use pure white right here, but I see a couple of darker highlights. So we'll put a few of those in. I just want them to be balanced. And then as I step back and look, I think that looks pretty good. I see we're missing our shadow from the ring, so let's put that in. Remember, it needs to stay warm. Our shadows are warm. And then we'll transition it into the finger. So this part is using a little bit lighter transition color. And then we'll get even a little bit lighter. And then so a little bit darker for this transitional step. There we go. I like that. So it is a shadow. It needs to have, you know, some sort of definitive shape, but not anything too hard. Let me just shape him a little bit. There we go. It's going to be a little bit harder shape in the light part of the finger and a less harder shape as it moves down here towards the shadow that's already happening in the finger. Like that. Now, let me, I'm going to put in this finger and then look at our negative shapes. And that would be this blue in between the fingers. That's the negative shape here. And I feel like this needs to come here and here. There we go. And there's a bit of a pretty strong highlight on this side of the finger. So that, then it gets darker as it moves into the tip of the finger. And I see some areas of saturation, which is nice. Grab that. And again, I'm going to just pull that flesh color into the fingernail, and then we'll add that. So has anybody done any cool online workshops lately? I have not. I would like to. Well, this fingernail is much darker than the one we did before this. So I'm looking to put in sort of the base color of it, and then we'll go back and define it, give it some highlights. There's a tiny bit of light peeking underneath this finger and hitting it. I like that she's got short fingernails. I like painting the part of the finger that you can see just going around the fingernail. So I see a good amount of red poking in here and right through here. So that's in. And right as that knuckle's starting to turn into the shadow, also along the edge, the bottom edge, I see. And that's probably happening because of the reflected light again. And there's a lot of ring taking up this part of the finger, but if I'm looking, I think that's pretty neutral. It's somewhat parallel to the light source, so it's going to be on the neutral side, but with a tiny bit of warmth. So we'll go with this base color, and then I can adjust it in the areas that I see fit. This ring looks fun. It's kind of a circle, a slight opening. So that'll be nice to paint. So I don't know if any of you have applied to the Art Renewal Center's salon. I had never have, but I'm thinking maybe it's time that I do. I've got some figurative works that I'm thinking about entering, and it's sometimes a little overwhelming. You know, it's expensive, so you have to pay for each entry. So it's hard to know which paintings to select to enter. So I just finished one. I put it on the YouTube post area. It's an Indian girl, a Native American Indian girl on a rock in the forest. She's having a conversation with a little bird. It's called The Conversation. And I feel like that might be worth entering. So I don't know. I was just struggling this morning with that. All right, so that's a good start for the finger. Let's get our highlight in here. I don't want to blend. I just want to plop in that highlight color and pull it across like that. I want to see that brush stroke. I want to see those brush marks. With this comber brush, it leaves that really cool brushy edge. Got this highlight in the hand here. It kind of is getting lost, so I'm going to brighten it up a little bit. And now that I can see some of the other skin tones in the hand, I feel like this area could be brighter. But remember, you have to watch that because it can trick you. The photos highlights tend to be brighter than what you would see as if you were painting it from life. So with that in mind, I'm trying to be careful, not go too crazy. And also notice I'm putting the brush sideways to just deposit some of that paint right on top of the wet paint that's there. And I like catching some of this blurred paint edges here. And I feel like it makes it look like she just put her hand there. You caught her in the motion of putting her hands, like a motion blur. I feel like I want to bring this center stone in this ring up higher. It's coming out past her finger. I see it more now. I think I missed it initially. And that's okay, because we can go back anytime we want and put that in. I like it. There we go. I like that. I like it. I feel like it's giving the illusion that you caught the hand as it was moving towards her mouth. The other thing that's cool with hands, these fingers kind of sit in this, if it were like a little matchbox or like a box of cards. So this hand part is a rectangle. It's got, 4 sides. So the top, the side, and then you'd also see a little bit of this side. So if you drew a rectangle like that, a 3D rectangle, then you'd know these fingers are sitting on the edge of this rectangular part of the hand here. So they step down. You can see that how they kind of, if they were coming off the edge of that box, how that would work. I like thinking about what structures underneath the hand while I'm painting it. It's not so much the anatomy of it as more if you were doing an analytical drawing, kind of like when you draw from your imagination, there's a typical way of drawing the hand. Just like, sort of the Loomis drawings for the face, there's an average standard shape that occurs, and then you adjust that to capture the lightness of a sitter in your portrait. Hands are kind of that same situation. You know, there's a initial shape and sort of the way you build the hand that occurs, and then you adjust for the individuals, you know, variation of it. Again, I'm going to vary the darkness of this line and the width of this to indicate the fingernail. I don't want to outline it completely, and I don't want each of my marks that are defining it to be the same all the way around. No, I don't. So it's okay to go ahead and put them in kind of heavy and then work around them and into them to give you some variation. Makes the finger appear more realistic that way. Anytime you outline something completely or exactly the same, you're going to get sort of a cartoony feel to what you're doing. So I feel this tip is really dark, but not this dark. But I wanted to really get it, and then I can go back and just take it down a little bit. Although it's pretty close. Pretty close. There's a little bit of a, well, that's way too light. There's a little bit of a highlight there, but not that much. It's okay. I'll just sculpt it in there. I'm going to get kind of an orangey color to push into that. That looks like a bit more of a reflected highlight. Have any of you guys ever tried sculpting? Because I feel like painting is a lot like sculpting. You're trying to create this 3D situation, although sculpting is 3D, but you're starting from, you know, a block of clay. So I'm looking at the negative shape, the space between that finger, and I feel like it's pretty good. I think what needs to happen is you need a little bit more line here. I left it kind of loose there because I wasn't sure. Now I feel more sure, so I'm going to put it in. Even if I put it in and I change my mind, I can take it back out. That is one of the things I love most about oil painting is you can pretty much correct or take away anything you don't like. I put something in my figurative painting the other day, and worked with it for about an hour putting it in. And after that, I decided I didn't like it and I wiped it all out. Now, I was putting that in on top of dried paint, mind you. If you're putting it in on wet paint, it's a little bit more involved to correct, but you can correct it. Just a matter of knowing how to correct it and doing it. So I want to create a nice separation between those two fingers right there. And where they separate, there's a little bit of light. It's almost a translucent red highlight situation happening. And then it turns into more of this mauve color here, which I wasn't sure how I felt about initially, but I'm okay with it after seeing it go in. That's one of those mid-tones that I often question myself. What color should it be? Okay, I think I see. I want to just put like a brush stroke of a little bit lighter pink color here, lighter than that. And I'm laying that brush sideways and going in the direction that it would wrap around the finger. So I got just a little bit darker color going on top of that. I feel like that did good. All right, let me put in this other ring. I'm going to use that gray, mid-value gray. So it starts about right here, comes around. Like so. It's kind of it's a circle that's melted onto her finger. Think of Dolly's melted clocks. And then it comes across here like that. And it leaves her skin showing through in that little bit of open area. And now I can grab some of this white and just push it in right along that circle. And this rhinestones, it's hard to see if those are black or clear, but they go in rows. So I'm going to push this light colored paint into the mid-value gray in a row. Like that. And then it comes around in a circle like that. So these are my initial starting highlights. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the almost pure black. This is more of a mixed grayish black. So I'm just pushing that in there. I didn't dip back into it till now, so I put in about 4 or 5 pushes before dipping back into the almost black color. So there's some shadows coming into play right about here because that ring's got some thickness. So now I can go back and define. I'm going to put the shadow shape. Remember, we want to use a reddish color shadow. And it's pretty dark. So there we go. That's better. Yeah, that's it. Now I'm going to grab pure white with my little tiny spotter brush. And I see some really strong highlights right along this edge. And to make those pop after I put them in, I'm going to put a few little pure black spots directly next to the white highlights. And that will really make them bright. All right, let's grab that pure chromatic black and put some, not too many, but you can see here. I'm sculpting with the paint. I love doing that. I just want to break up this line, so I'm going to pull a little highlight through there, and right there. So it looks like we've got another shadow here. Make that a little darker. Keeping with the warm shadows. And it's making me see that this part of the finger could be a little darker. So if I darken this part of the finger, I gotta go back and darken the shadow. That's okay. Here we go. There we are. I like that better. And I see there is a pretty dark red shadow happening between the fingers. So this is a little bit of that rectangular edge that I was talking about. You can see how this makes it. The finger's just sitting on the edge of this rectangle. And I'm going to grab some of this pure cad red and just work that in here to the edge of it. Putting in some slight areas of pure red like this really helps bring life into the portrait. I like to do that near the eyes. You gotta be careful, you don't want to go crazy with it, but if you can just grab a little bit of red and pull it in, it will add a lot of life in the eyes. So this finger here comes over that red shadow like that. And it's light to about right past, just past that ring. So I'm using the ring above it as a landmark to see where my highlight stops. And I'm just pulling it into the finger a little bit further here. There we go. Now, got a little bit warmer at the knuckle. And as it's turning away from the light, it's going pretty much right into a warm shadow color. So if any of you guys grab this image from pexels.com and you paint it, I want to see, show me. You can send it to me in an email. I don't know if you can put it in the, oops, into the, I don't know, what is that, the comment section. I don't know if you can put an image in there, can you? But my email's listed in the description, so if you paint one, let me see it. I like seeing what you guys are working on. Okay, I'm just going to fill in a little bit of this back of her hand. So again, it's pretty parallel to the light source right here. So neutral. Neutral, but light. Pay attention to the value and the temperature. Neutral and light. I'm going to lighten that up with a little bit of white, which is neutral. There we go. There we go. So this, it's crazy lighting. Okay. What I see in the photograph is a bit of a bluish purple area, and then it turns warm. So should I paint what I see? I don't know. Let's try it. Like I said, I put it in and I don't like it. I will take it out. So here's that bluish kind of skin color. It even comes just right underneath that knuckle there. So the blue on my palette is